Universal, as well as our co-sponsor, the San Fernando Valley Financial Development Corporation. The media sponsor for this event is Van Nuys News Press. I'd now like to introduce David Phelps from the Association of Independent Commercial Producers to introduce our moderator. David?
Thanks, Kobe. We're thrilled to be here and be joined by NBC Universal and State Farm as the presenting sponsors for this forum. One of these two individuals here will be the next Assembly member for the 39th Assembly District. And elections are a time for educating and engaging people and making an informed decision on who will bring forth ideas, who will work to fix problems in Sacramento, and who would be the best served district and its community. In a time of high unemployment, economic uncertainty, and public distrust of politicians, this state needs to be fixed, and it's up to our moderator, Steve Nissen, from NBC Universal to help us decide who we should serve. Steve?
Thank you, David. Well, I am from NBC Universal, so I'll do my best Tom Brokaw imitation this morning.
Need to lower the voice a little.
I'm flanked by two individuals, one of whom will be the next Assembly member for the 39th Assembly District. And just so you get some geographical context, the 39th AD represents the San Fernando Valley communities of Sylmar, San Fernando, Pacoima, Arleta, Mission Hills, Panorama City, North Hills, Sun Valley, Granada Hills, Sunland Tahunga, Shadow Hills, and portions of Lakeview Terrace, Van Nuys, and North Hollywood. The two candidates who we're joined by today include Los Angeles City Council member Richard Alarcon, to my right, and Assembly member Felipe Fuentes, Chief of Staff Raul Bocanegra, to my left. The ground rules are as follows. Now listen. We'll give each candidate 2 minutes for an opening statement. I will then ask a few questions and ask that the candidates limit their responses to 2 minutes each. We'll also have an opportunity to open up questions to the floor. We'll try to limit those responses to 1 minute so that we have time to conclude this debate. And then at the end, each candidate will have a 2-minute closing statement. Doug, over here, most importantly for you two gentlemen, although the rest of you are welcome to meet Doug as well, we'll be holding up a warning sign. The yellow sign, like a yellow traffic light, is a 15-second warning, and then the red sign is the stop sign. All right, so we will, and I will shuffle the order that the candidates answer and respond, but let's start the traditional way in alphabetical order, and I would ask that Councilmember Alarcon give the first 2-minute opening statement.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having us. We have a very vigorous campaign. I think it's going to be good for the San Fernando Valley because of the presidential election, and so the competition will bring out more voters, and I think that's good to send a message from the San Fernando Valley. It's been my pleasure to be an elected official in the San Fernando Valley for the past 18.5 years, and of course I worked with VICA dating back to my days with Mayor Bradley 5 years before that. And in that time, we've had an interesting relationship. Obviously, I'm a very staunch Democrat, but at the same time, it's been my pleasure to work with VICA to encourage business. My father was a small businessman for 45 years in the San Fernando Valley. My wife has been in business for 20 years. And we absolutely have a clear understanding, primarily for the small business community. But having said that, it's been my pleasure as a state senator. One of my very first pieces of legislation that was signed by the governor was a bill sponsored by VICA, the first bill sponsored by VICA, I believe, in its history, the Truth in Bonding measure. But whether it's supporting micro enterprise, small businesses, transportation bonds, supporting infrastructure for the San Fernando Valley, fighting for our fair share from the other side of the hill, it's always been a pleasure to join with VICA to do all of those things. Now, we're not always going to agree, and anybody that tells you that they're going to agree with you 100% of the time is lying to you. I know it's shocking to think that an elected official or candidate would lie to you, but the fact of the matter is we have produced. So it's been my pleasure to work with you to rebuild rebuild the General Motors plant when people said it couldn't be done, to rebuild the Price Pfister plant when people said it couldn't be done, to work with you to create jobs in the northeast San Fernando Valley and throughout the San Fernando Valley in various positions. That's what it's all about. But it's also been my pleasure to work with you to expand educational opportunities, to expand social understanding, the fact that the San Fernando Valley feels somewhat disregarded by the other parts of Los Angeles. So I'll continue to work with VICA as a key element of promoting the San Fernando Valley.
Thank you. Mr. Bocanegra.
Thank you very much, Steve, and thank you very much to VICA and all the media sponsors and all the other co-sponsors, especially the San Fernando Valley Financial Development Corporation, Roberto Barragan, who I know very well. My name is Raul Bocanegra. Some of you are perhaps meeting me for the first time. I'm running for office. I am homegrown from the San Fernando Valley. All the communities that Steve talked about, they're home to me. Whether it's Arleta, Pacoima, the city of San Fernando, I've lived in those areas at one point or another, and I've been serving those areas at one point or another for the last 16 years. I have had the honor of serving that area in many different roles as a college professor. I'm a professor at Cal State Northridge, and I've been doing that for quite a long time now. Before that at Cal State Long Beach, but now I teach urban planning at CSUN, and after this I'll be grading a stack load of papers. I've also had the very honor and opportunity to work for some pretty good elected officials in the area, people that you know, people that you've supported along the way, like State Senator Alex Padilla. I served with them for 7 years on the city council. Before that, I also spent some time in the city planning department and for another council office. For the last 4 years, I've had the distinct pleasure of working for Assemblymember Felipe Fuentes, and I've been able to work with a couple of you here and VICA on very important pieces of public policy, namely AB 1069 last year, the film and TV tax credit that we were able to get out of the Assembly and signed by Jerry Brown last year. Very important not just to California, but very important to the San Fernando Valley, especially in areas like Sun Valley, which have groups like PRG, which do a lot of post-production of movies that we've all heard of. And I just want to let you know that I'm running for office because I really think that somebody like me with a new take and a new perspective and somebody who's homegrown should have an opportunity to serve and to work hard in terms of trying to develop new opportunities. I also have had the pleasure of being a founding board member of the only community development credit union in the San Fernando Valley called Pacoima Federal Development Credit Union. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sherman. Okay, let me, this first question will go to both of you. Let me start with you, Councilmember Alarcon. What is the first bill you plan to introduce?
I have no idea. My general concerns, you know, as a former teacher, I will always have a primary focus on education, but health is a critical issue. I plan to do some work with mental health. In terms of other work, some of the work that I've done in the past is indicative of what I would focus on. So I carried one of the largest infrastructure improvement bills in the history of California, and to redevelop public facilities for the state of California, stimulate the economy. It was Governor Gray Davis's stimulation bill, and I carried that legislation. But I also carried a housing bill called the Cal Home Program. I created that program, which generated 70,000 home ownership opportunities, and for the first time ever allocated general fund money to $550 million to develop homes with private industry in our communities throughout the state of California. So those are some of the things that I've done in the past. I would continue to do some of the same things. I think our primary focus will be on jobs and job creation, and so those are two ways in which I've done it in the past, and I would expect to do it in the future.
Mr. Bocanegra.
Thank you very much. I think that it would depend on what happens here with the current film and tax credit bill that Assemblymember Fuentes is carrying and I'm working on, Assembly Bill 2026. If we're only able to get a 1-year extension on that, we're going to try our darndest to get up to 5 years. I would introduce a bill to continue that extension of that tax credit. Part B of my bill would also look at refunding and looking at ways to strengthen a little known program that has a lot of success in California. And I'm not saying this because I was on the board of the entity that does it here in the Sacramento Valley, but the State Loan Guarantee Program. The State Loan Guarantee Program has been studied by the Little Hoover Commission and by the State Controller. It brings in revenue. The money that goes out is quantified 3 or 4 times over. And this is a program that has had tremendous success, especially here in the San Fernando Valley. And I believe that there are resources out there, especially with the Treasurer's Office. They have $6 million that isn't moving right now through the CalCap program. And the State Loan Guarantee Program has already run through its money that they received from the Obama Recovery Act dollars. That's a program that I would look at, maybe looking at $2 million, moving it into BT&H, the Business Transportation and Housing Department, and trying to get funds for groups like the San Fernando Valley Financial Development Corporation and the 21 other FDCs throughout California, so they can do something that we all, I think, here can agree on, stimulate the local business economy by expanding and creating small business opportunities and jobs.
All right, I'm going to ask this next question in part because I can pronounce her name correctly. But yesterday, Chief Justice Kantil Sakaue gave the State of the Judiciary address before the legislature, asking for more funding for the courts. And also, I know that education is high on your list of priorities, and higher education has asked for the same assistance. So with respect to the judiciary and higher education, what would you do in response to those demands for more funds? And let's start with you.
Sure, thank you very much. I did not listen to the State of the Judiciary, so I'm at a little bit of a disadvantage, but I had breakfast yesterday with an attorney, a nice man and someone that I'm getting to know, and he had expressed to me how long it's taken to get some of his cases. He's a trial attorney, and he's trying to help and fight on behalf of people, of the consumers who have been wronged by certain products out there. And what David was basically telling me is how long it's taken him to get his cases to court, sometimes 4 to 5 months before a plaintiff is able to see his case or her case seen in front of a judge. So I think it's absolutely important that we look at trying to direct resources to our court system. It's absolutely key, not just for justice, but also for trying to protect the consumers. In terms of education, higher education is what I have to deal with all the time, and it's been a pleasure. I have students who come to me all the time, and essentially what they're telling me is, in various different ways, can you teach me something at the end of the day that's going to give me a job? Because I graduate in next year. I graduate in May, and I'm definitely afraid of what's happening outside of the economy. So it's something that weighs heavily on me. I think if we're trying to keep an eye on comprehensive tax reform, I think education has to be the forefront priority for us to fund once we're able to grow the economy and grow revenues. Whether it's at the UC system, like at UCLA where I graduated, or at CSUN, or the CSU system, like at CSUN where I teach, it's absolutely key, and it's part of the economic development strategy for this economy. If we're not educating the workforce of tomorrow, if we're behind 1 million people who don't have a bachelor's degree, that's the recipe for failure.
Mr. Alarcon, same question to you.
Yeah, I'm really disappointed, but I also did not spend my time listening to the Supreme Court Justice's message, although I consider that a priority. In the future, I will do so.
And I won't test either of you trying to pronounce your names.
Thank you.
Thank you. But I can't disagree with anything that Raul said, but in terms of actual practice, it's always been my pleasure to support the expansion of opportunities to expedite our judicial process. Clearly, the system is slowing things down. The biggest complaint that I hear from business is time. Some people say, well, it's the cost of doing business. Well, of course that enters into it, but the costs are driven by the length of time it takes for projects to get done. And the same thing applies to the court system, and it impacts the business process in the same way. So to the extent that our judiciary could process concerns about CEQA violations or you know, lawsuits related to environmental concerns, I think that would be a good thing for California, and I do believe that it would create more jobs in the process. Education, it should be California's #1 priority. I grew up in California when our educational system was #1 in the United States of America, and now it's whether you're talking about preschool education or higher ed, we have reduced our investment in education, and I think part of the negative economy that we're experiencing has to do with our lack of investment in rebuilding our educational system or expanding those opportunities. So I will always be a champion for expanding educational opportunities at every level.
So that really leads us to a larger
Set us up.
question. No, because I really didn't know what I would ask next. Now I do. And that is that whether it's the judiciary or higher education or so many other issues, our state budget is fundamentally broken, and I think most experts would agree there's no clear end in sight. So as a newly elected legislator, what would you do? What would be your priorities to help fix the state budget? We'll start with you, Mr. Alarcon.
Well, first of all, I think there has to be an absolute focus on which jobs need to be spared that ensure that we're generating more revenues for the state of California and stimulating our economy. We also, I think, have to focus on the quality of jobs. Part of the transition that we are seeing with this economy is a need to focus toward future economies. And while we have stagnated in some ways with old industries that aren't going to help us in the future. So we need to find those industries that will sustain us through the future. I believe that a green agenda in the business community is the future. And so I think we need to refocus our energies on building green businesses. That's why I introduced the Green Business Certification Program. Bonaventure Hotel was the first to be certified. They saved $1.3 million in the first year of operating that program. And I believe that if we can establish an economy around green business, that will be helpful. So I will be introducing legislation to continue growing that industry. Secondly, I think we need to invest in healthcare. Healthcare is a very good industry that pays well, very similar to the film industry. And so I would want to expand our investment into healthcare, but at the same time look at the economic opportunities that are created, the job creation opportunities. We provide 30,000 visas to foreign-born immigrants who are providing health services to the state of California. We need to grow those out of our educational system so that they can, those dollars stay in our local economy. My work on the film industry, I think, is well known by the film industry, and we need to continue. I support the legislation that Raul mentioned, and no, I will make it my first work to continue the work we've done in the film industry. That Krikorian bill was critical for California's economy in the last several years, and I believe that we need to continue that type of approach.
Thank you. And Bocanegra.
Thank you very much. I think that all levels of government are going to have to do more with less. I mean, I think that's a reality, unfortunately. But I think the state has to be careful. We can't fall into some of the mistakes that other levels of government have fallen into, like the city of Los Angeles with their early retirement program. I think it's important that at the state, with the core functions that it provides, that we try to maintain as much as possible the experience that we need to provide those services. But many of you here all run your own business. You run a business, you're part of a business. The state of California is $20 billion smaller than when in its general fund than it was 5 years ago. It's impossible to maintain its core function of providing state services with fluctuating revenues like that. So comprehensive tax reform is so much of a key that has to be part of our agenda and will be part of my agenda. Let me be clear, we have to grow revenues. We have to grow the economy. And last year I was very fortunate enough to try to do that. The sales factor bill that Councilmember Fuentes carried towards the last week of session that we got out of the Assembly and fell a few votes shy in the Senate of getting approved. That is a bill that was rewarding businesses for creating jobs outside of California, not in California, and that to me just doesn't make any sense. So our bill was trying to keep and reward businesses that were creating jobs, close that loophole, and that would have brought $1 billion back to California, back to the general fund, but not into the black hole. What the bill also tried to do was to incentivize the local economies throughout the state. And I'm talking about offering tax credits to small businesses and manufacturing. I believe that moving California from a brown stack economy to a green stack economy is so much of a key as part of our economic development strategy for the future. And I believe we were able to get that bill out of the Assembly with bipartisan support. Let me say that again, bipartisan support. Republicans voted for the bill. Why? Because it made sense, it wasn't going into a black hole, but rather it was investing into our future economy.
What's the position of both of you gentlemen on the governor's tax initiative, which is now, I guess, the governor's California Federation of Teachers combined tax initiative? Mr. Bocanegra.
You know, I'm going to be supporting it. You know, I think I would have preferred the earlier version of the governor's proposal, but when you have USD cutting adult education, laying off teachers, I know many teachers in the Northeast Sacramento Valley who are being laid off, and they're good, young, experienced teachers, passionate about educating our kids. But when they're being laid off, we need revenues. So I'll be supporting the proposal on the November ballot.
I have to agree with Raul Bocanegra. The governor's proposal, I think, is a reasonable proposal given the situation in our economy. And you know, I believe that we need to increase the taxes on the super wealthy to the extent, at least, to what Ronald Reagan increased the taxes to, and this measure would accomplish that. I think that we have to adjust our society. The fact is, we have the largest gap between the haves and the have-nots since just before the Depression. If that isn't a crying call for an adjustment, I don't know what is. This poor economy has affected every citizen. Foreclosure affected everybody, not just the poor. But while the poor were the bellwether for all these indications, we then saw so many others in other categories of the economy fall into the same trappings. I think that that we need to ensure that our financial institutions are reinvesting in our communities. That's why I introduced the banking responsibility measure in the city of Los Angeles. It's simply stated, if we're going to invest in banks and financial institutions to handle our money in the hundreds of millions and even billions of dollars, then we need to hold them responsible and accountable to reinvest that money in small businesses and home ownership in our community. I believe we need to do that same kind of thing at the state level. So the governor's measure is a way to generate revenue. But in terms of changing California's culture to address the concerns of this widening gap, I think we have to go much further. And the banking responsibility ordinance, I think, at the city level will be demonstrative of what we need to do at the state level to ensure that banks are investing in our community, not eliminating credit rates for small business, but actually increasing opportunities for financing. I'm sorry. First time ever.
I have several more questions. Let me ask one more, and then I'm just prying you all to think about questions. I'll throw it open to the audience after this next question, and then we'll come back with some wrap-up questions. But I have 3 children in the LA Unified School District system, so I have particular interest in this answer. But what role do you think the state has in engaging with a local school system as large as LAUSD? And if there is a role, what should it be, and what would you, as a newly elected legislator, do about LAUSD and its budget problems from the state level?
Well, California's problems with education, and first of all, the state has a critical relationship. We fund, the state funds all of the school districts and the charter school system throughout the state of California. So it's an absolute relationship. I believe the fundamental problem with our education system is our lack of investment in each student. We spend $9 a day on our K through 12 students, and that is 48th in the nation. So we essentially get what we pay for. Our performance is rating at about 48th to 50th sometimes, depending on which category you're looking at. We can't compete like that. So we have to increase the opportunities by increasing the per capita spending in our public school system. So that's a critical way. We've seen some tremendous investments in the charter school programs. I was on the board of the the Bond Street 20th Century Learning program before charter schools were expanded throughout the state of California. I think it was one of the first charter schools in the state. And we've continued to develop charter schools that are teaching poor minority kids at levels that people before said it couldn't be done. So whether you're talking about Valor Academy or Bert Corona School, they are graduating kids at higher college-going rates than ever in the history of the Northeast San Fernando Valley. And while I support our public school system and think we need to increase our average daily attendance spending, I also believe we have to invest in the charter school system to ensure that those people with most economic challenges, social challenges, will have an opportunity to see a different way, but the numbers don't lie. I mean, their graduation rates are good, their penetration rates in college are better, and we I think, need to invest in that system as well.
Mr. Bocanegra.
Yes, thank you. I don't want LAUSD having to make tough, devastating cuts like they were doing, and I know they take no pleasure in it. I know it's a heart-wrenching thing they have to do, but they're not getting enough money from Sacramento. And I think that's another reason for us to look at cutting red tape and streamlining the bureaucracy at the state so that the business community can do business and stay in California. We grow revenues, we grow a tax base, we get back to funding the educational system at real Prop 98 funding levels, and that which is what we haven't been doing lately. We need to increase that funding, and also I think it's very important for the state to also take a lead in some of the terrible things that have been happening at some of those schools. Senate Bill 1530 by Senator Alex Padilla is a bill that's going to help LAUSD in that respect. It's called the School Side Child Safety Act, to when you have instances and reports of abuse by teachers, whether it's child abuse, drugs, or violence, those are teachers that immediately have rights, but at the same time also we're protecting and we're notifying the community of such abuses so that things like Miramonte don't happen again.
Open it up to the audience. Kobe.
In addition to currently serving as the chair-elect of VICA, I've been chairing the Transportation Committee for the last 4 years. And a couple of quick observations before I ask a question, and that is that it seems to me that in the Measure R funding, I know that the state didn't have a direct role in that. The Valley did not get, I think, its fair share of transportation funding. The needs in the Valley are extreme, not just, certainly we need improvements in our highways, but also you look at the Orange Line, and clearly there's an appetite for mass transit. If you build it, people will ride it, no doubt about it. In your role as a member of the state legislature, and finally, it seems to me that the Transportation Committee is also not funding Southern California to the same extent that Northern California is getting funds in terms of some of the state funds. As a state legislature, as a member of the state legislature, how much of a priority and what would you do specifically to try to increase the funds that we get in the San Fernando Valley to improve our transportation options?
All right. Well, do I volunteer to go first? It was your turn anyway.
Funny that you mentioned that, because as I mentioned, I teach a class at CSUN. It's about Los Angeles, and I'm very excited about the class. And I break up the weeks by subject area. Transportation is the one where all the students get excited about, because everybody has a complaint. Everybody is an expert when it comes to transportation in Los Angeles, and I've had some pretty good guest speakers along the way these last year. Jaime de la Vega, Richard Katz, and some folks from DOT, and from MTA. Absolutely, I think that we haven't been getting our fair share. I think bus-only lanes are good ideas. I think that we need to do more of that. They're cheaper, they're efficient, and I think success breeds success. And I think the Orange Line is a great example of that. I was there for the grand opening, and I took it, and I was quickly amazed by it. By the same token, I think that we also have to invest in our public infrastructure. Our streets and our roads are crumbling. Just trying to put a slurry seal on some of our streets isn't going to cut it anymore. We need to look at public infrastructure as a priority, part and parcel of our transportation strategy.
Mr. Alarcon?
Well, I think the best way to answer the question is what have you done in the past? So when Bob Hertzberg introduced the transportation infrastructure bill, the governor supported it. I challenged them, and in fact, I refused to participate in their press conference because not only did I calculate that the measures that were included in Bob's bill to benefit the San Fernando Valley were going to pass no matter what, but I calculated that the Northeast San Fernando Valley didn't get enough. And so I held them accountable to that standard, and the governor did provide an additional $200 million to provide projects for the North San Fernando Valley. I just intersected with the Orange Line and two buses that were coming together, which was a product of that infrastructure. But I wanted that for the Northeast San Fernando Valley because we had the highest bus ridership in the San Fernando Valley. And so that process was included in Measure R, and I negotiated with Mayor Villaraigosa to ensure that there was a more focus on the San Fernando Valley, and particularly to retain that commitment to the bus rapid line in perhaps on Van Nuys, or we're still working on where it would go, but the funding is there. So I think that you're absolutely right. The San Fernando Valley doesn't get its fair share, whether you're talking, no matter what issue you're talking about. We don't get our fair share, and so you need an advocate who can get those resources to the San Fernando Valley. And I've been that advocate, and I think that we've done it in a way to get more funding. The priorities are to finish the Caltrans projects that are going on right now that are funded by the ARA dollar from the federal government. I do think that if it's incumbent on us to get the federal funding, if we can get the 30-10 plan implemented, then it's a question of implementing the projects, getting them done within that 10 years. And so the Assemblyman, I think, will play a critical role in expediting those projects.
Yes, Greg.
Education. We all believe that education isn't where it should be, and we've all heard about the per pupil spending being lowest and so on. But I do know that almost 50% of the state budget goes to education. So if the question is, where is it all going? It's not getting into the classroom. And maybe we don't need more revenue. Maybe it's the way it's allocated. Maybe too much is being spent in administration. I don't know. But I do know that, there's very little left in the budget after you take, the mandates out of it for things like transportation and so on. So I guess my question is, what can we do to identify where the funds really lie, as opposed to just throwing money at it?
I think it's my turn, but absolutely. The issue is not just how much spending, but you can't separate that issue. That is the fundamental problem with our education system, is our investment into it. And to the extent that we are underfunding it, we will always be short in terms of the product. But in terms of things like the categorical spending formulas that mandate in the allocation of dollars to programs that sometimes you gotta wonder about. So I think it's critical that we revamp our categorical spending, streamline them, and reduce the administrative costs of the school districts throughout the state of California. It is a critical issue. I think there is far too many dollars that are focused on administration, far too little on the classroom, which is where those dollars need to go. So I agree with you, and that's something that we need to work on.
Mr. Bocanegra.
Yes, thank you very much. I concur. I think, as I said earlier, there's always more. there's more that all levels of government are gonna have to do with less. But by the same token, Prop 98, that funding level has been decreasing for the last number of years because of a formula Sacramento likes to use sometimes.
Well, the whole budget has come down, so.
The entire, right, and also, when LAUSD is making these tough decisions and people come out to talk about, don't cut this and don't cut that, I also like to, and I've been meeting a lot of those people, please do something about adult education, but they're only there when, times are bad. I encourage them also to be there, get involved into your local schools, become a parent teacher, activist at your local parent center, and a lot of folks are doing that. We need to hold our superintendent accountable and our school board members accountable, and not just be there for when times are bad. Also get involved in what's going on in the local schools, and also at the same time in Sacramento, if there are certain tweaks that have to get done. I know that Julia Brawley's tried to do a bill that does that. It changes the per pupil funding formula. It unfortunately doesn't make it to the other house sometimes. Those are things that I would love to take a look at, and I'm gonna make, whether it's K through 14 or higher education, those are priorities for me.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes.
Suzette Martinez, Los Angeles Universal Preschool. The governor's proposed budget cuts funding for transitional kindergarten, along with a lot of other educational cuts. At LAF, we really understand that access to high quality preschool is essential, and our kids are failing, and because of government mandates, kindergarten is the new first grade. So there's definitely a foundation that is missing for preschool kids. What is your commitment to preschool children and to early education? Because most of the talks are about higher education, K through 12, but never about preschool and early education. What is your commitment to early education?
I think we're on to Mr. Bocanegra.
Sure. My commitment is to be with LA up on that one. Study after study shows, I'm talking about the one, I forget if it's Dr. Bautista at UCLA, students that go through that program, that start early, do well, they graduate, and then they go on to go get a degree. So it not only does it just make sense for a family, it also makes sense in terms of investing into our future workforce. So whether it's standing up and being counted and trying to perhaps be willing to vote no sometimes to show our leadership that we're serious about our priorities, this one being higher education, or even early education, I'm going to be there with you.
Well, my educational studies on that issue have been conducted in my household. My two adult children who went to preschool have a far greater appreciation for the educational process and have persisted in education. And I'm terrified as a father of a 4-year-old that the public school that is just 2 doors from my house may not be as equipped as I would like it to be for her education. I also think though that we need to help parents be empowered to teach their kids the notion of becoming a lifelong learner. And one of the most severe problems we have in Los Angeles is there's a disconnect between those parents who do not speak the dominant language, English, and they therefore cannot be as helpful to their kids. They can teach them the value of education, but they can't help them with their homework. They can teach them to learn computers, but they can't work with them on computers like I'm sure all of you do with your kids. And so we need to address the resources in the home in order to have a system that is advancing just by the sheer weight of the desire for education as opposed to relying on funding for education. And I believe that personal commitment to education is far more important than any funding that we provide.
Mr. VICA.
I expected Greg to actually ask this question, but I will. In terms of redevelopment, the governor just didn't like redevelopment, got rid of them, took their money. and now there are so many projects just kind of hanging out there. And redevelopment really did create jobs, regardless of what anyone wants to say. What are your plans in terms of addressing that now vacuum in terms of redevelopment? You have a district that has used redevelopment and needs it.
Well, I disagree with you. The governor loves redevelopment when he's mayor.
Yes.
He used it very effectively. But he's governor, and he had to find money, and that was the low-hanging fruit, and he took it. We, in some jurisdictions, frankly, have abused the process and taken advantage of the process and not utilized it for its maximum purpose. In the Northeast San Fernando Valley, at a time when other council members in the valley were opposed to expanding community redevelopment, I fought for community redevelopment and organized the community to support it. And in the process, we couldn't have done the General Motors remake. We couldn't have done the Price Pfister remake. We couldn't have done literally thousands of homes built with CRA money, the median improvements, the public infrastructure improvements. The city hall in Pacoima would not have been built if it weren't for the vision of the community to embrace community redevelopment. So I think we should open that door again, but be mindful of mistakes that have been made, whether they be in our jurisdiction or in other jurisdictions, to be careful with the taxpayers' money and not be frivolous with it. I will be happy to work to recreate a redevelopment system in California that addresses those concerns. I think they were legitimate. I have my own concerns about some CRA funding, even in Los Angeles, but I think that we used it very effectively in the Northeast San Fernando Valley, and in fact, I count it as one of my greatest accomplishments.
Mr. Bocanegra.
You should come by my class tonight. This week's about redevelopment, actually. And I have a guest speaker on Thursday from the redevelopment agency, actually. Yes, this was very tough for me as a staff person to the legislature to see happen. I think that in Los Angeles there are some pretty good examples of when they got it right and some pretty good examples of when they got it wrong. Having said that, I believe that the time is probably sometime into the near future when we can look at trying to bring back economic development activities or redevelopment in some form or another. I know that there's been talk in Los Angeles about looking at the model that they do in New York, which is a quasi-city and nonprofit department looking at doing economic development functions. But I'm not sure what the appetite is going to be by this governor right now. You have a lot of members of the assembly and a lot of people in the community who protested what happened when that vote happened. So for me, as an urban planner, somebody that was trained, as somebody whose, I think my dedication has always been providing equity in areas like the Northeast San Fernando Valley, especially Pacoima, it's absolutely key. But also there are other things you can do. I was very successful recently in I am working in hand with the local council office in Sun Valley to bring $3 million. Macaria Flores is here, who was my colleague at the time. $3 million in EDA funding to San Fernando Road and Brantford. And the whole goal there was invest in the public infrastructure. And part of the money was also matched by the city of Los Angeles. And there at a site at San Fernando Road and Brantford, we have a FedEx distribution center that's also going to provide jobs for the local community. There are other things, tools at the disposal of the city and at the state, like the state loan guarantee program that I talked about earlier, but also the Section 108 program. It's always considered as something to help incentivize housing. It can produce jobs. I'm not sure if, I think there should be a way for us to take a look at that and providing all these different incentives all in one place.
So, since we're talking about development, redevelopment, and development, let's delve into CEQA. And I ask this question from the perspective of someone who, in private practice, I represented developers who were on the other end of CEQA lawsuits. When I was a public interest lawyer, I represented plaintiffs in environmental justice cases utilizing CEQA. When I worked for the governor, I ran NPR, which oversaw CEQA filings. And now I work at NBC Universal, which has a rather significant project that is getting to know CEQA very well. In the last session, there were two bills that were passed. One is we commonly call the stadium bill, the AEG stadium bill, and then there was a separate AB 900, which opened up some of the benefits of the stadium bill to other projects. So far, there's no football team and no stadium that we know of in LA, and of the AB 900 opportunities in the entire state of California, one project has applied. So that would lead some to conclude that CEQA streamlining hasn't quite kicked into gear. Is there something else you might consider to make CEQA more rational and balanced environmental protection with development? I forgot who goes first. Have you been keeping track?
With SB 900, the bill by the Pro Tem, you're absolutely right. It looked good on paper, but it hasn't really fulfilled to what it was trying to do. I think that if we're looking at fixes, one thing that I would do is lower the threshold on that. I think the threshold was $100 million or something like that. It was something outrageous. And there's not a whole lot of projects out there in California, outside of Los Angeles, that are going to be able to qualify for something like that. One thing that I found strange is that city government or local government projects didn't qualify for this. I'm talking about the America Forward project or Measure Art. MTA is locked out of trying to use that law to fast track its projects. So if we can all agree that making transportation enhancements is important to California and investing in public infrastructure is important, shouldn't we also take advantage of the fact that here we have something on the books? Local taxpayers in Los Angeles County have all said this is a priority, that they'll tax themselves. Why can't it take advantage of SB 900? And why can't it also qualify for the same types of fast tracking with the protections in place of CEQA, but the fast tracking that the stadium bill on paper is receiving and SB 900, but the MTA projects are not. I think there's a move afoot. I believe it's Councilmember Fuhr trying to make sure that those MTA projects qualify for that CEQA streamlining. I think it just makes sense. They're not going to be at the $100 million level, but by the same token, they're going to make improvements at the local level. They're going to make transportation flow quicker, and it's going to provide jobs. And those jobs are going to provide local economic spending here in Los Angeles. So those are some quick things that I would do to try to maybe make some edits to SB 900.
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything Raul said, but I would also like to add that the questions that you asked about the judiciary, the questions you asked about the state budget, and also impact this process. One way to streamline CEQA is to expedite the court process, and so that has been a tremendous hit. In fact, it's been abused by people who use that process to just slow down the project to the extent that the project can't be financed anymore. That is wrong. I support CEQA. I support the notion of protecting our environment. I support, who doesn't support mitigating against traffic? I remember a conversation I had with my dad after serving in the council for a couple of years, and I said, Dad, what do you think of development? He goes, I like it. And I said, well, why do you like it? And he says, because we can get good stuff in our neighborhood too with redevelopment, with development. And I said, well, my dad was hitting on a key point, and that was that we should use development to improve our communities, and we should mitigate against those problems, that long-standing problems that develop over time. And that's your project is one such project that can create tremendous improvements to the southeast San Fernando Valley and reduce some of the existing traffic congestion that is there. So we don't need to slow down those projects. We need to move them forward quicker to improve our neighborhood. So I absolutely believe that the key is in that streamlining and any fixes that need to maintain the integrity of CEQA at the same time recognizing that, that we lose benefits to the community by slowing down projects unnecessarily. You know, those I think are very reasonable requests.
Let me ask you a question about yourselves. If you had to look back on your life and career and identify a moment or two that really demonstrated a profile in courage, where you did something that you're very proud of, you know, maybe stood up against the stream of public opinion, or you were on a lonely march, at least at first, what would that be, Mr. Bocanegra? What, are you first or you first? See, I'm being a terrible moderator because I've lost track.
You're great.
Who goes first? But you're first.
I guess I would have to go back to when Roberto Barragan and I went to go talk about our business plan a couple of years ago, back in 2002, when there was only one bank in Pacoima at the time. One bank in Pacoima for over 100,000 people that the Census Bureau could count. There's a lot more folks out there, if you're familiar with my neighborhood. And we had tried in vain to try to convince other banks to locate in Pacoima. And sometimes being first is kind of scary. Sometimes you have to go out there, do it the hard way, and really show that you can do something, that you can bank the unbanked out there. And when we put together that business plan and we showed it to the NCUA, the National Credit Union folks at the federal level that oversee federally chartered credit unions, they were like, we don't think your business plan is viable. We don't think a credit union is going to work. You're going to need some mentorship. And we went to some of the other banks in the area to see if they would be our mentors, to help us, to show the federal folks that you can create a community-based credit union in a low-income area, a working class area, that it could be successful. And now, almost 6 years later, we have over 1,000 members of people in the community. We do $2.4 million in SBA lending for small and medium-sized businesses in California, predominantly in the San Fernando Valley. And I gotta tell you that sometimes I was a little bit shaken as to whether or not this credit union could work. It had a great leader at the time, and a lot of great folks and a lot of good bankers who helped us out, who mentored us along the way. But when they said it couldn't be done, guess what? It's right there, right next to the public housing project in San Fernando, in Pacoima, called Sacramento Gardens. It's a real bank. It's making community-based loans, and it's providing services to a community that desperately needs them. And then the following year, Wells Fargo opened up the bank. It's just not more than a mile away. Success breeds success. But we had to show them that it could happen.
Thank you, Mr. Alarcon.
Well, I guess I've had a number of firsts in my career, fighting for the empowerment zone, the enterprise zone, the community redevelopment area in the northeast San Fernando Valley, fighting to build the first ever pediatric trauma care center in the San Fernando Valley, closing the Lopez Canyon landfill. Those are all great firsts. And by the way, I never stood alone, and that's an important point to make. I want to go back to when I was in high school running for student body president, and the principal called me in and said, "You can't be student body president." There had never been a Hispanic student body president. But the proportion of Hispanics in the school was 27%. They said, "You cannot be student body president." But I believe we could build bridges. I believe we could build coalitions. I believe that we could work together as a community to create a new message out of the northeast San Fernando Valley. In that case, at Poly High School. And I remember the headline the day after the election that said Alarcon wins in tight race, and in fact I won by 1%, and created a different kind of approach to changing the northeast San Fernando Valley, and that was bringing people together. So if there was a defining moment in my life, it was when I decided to run for student body president. And I remember when my girlfriend got pregnant and I was 18 years old, and my grandmother cried and she said, "Does that mean you're not going to finish college?" And because I was carrying something that was bigger than Richard Alarcon. I was carrying a message for the Northeast Valley. And my grandmother knew that, and my friends knew that, and people helped me along the way because they needed that. And that is what is a huge difference in this election. The Northeast San Fernando Valley has a relationship with me that goes back to that moment. They believed beyond what they dreamed, and we fulfilled that dream when we shut down Lopez Canyon, when we rebuilt the General Motors plant, when we rebuilt the Price Vista plant. And that's why they elected me 7 times. And so if there's a defining moment, it goes back to my high school days when this C average student said, I can make things different, and we did.
We're starting to wind down now, so I want to give another chance to the audience if you have any more questions. All right, and then, yes, sir, Kobe. Oh, actually.
I just want to actually follow up on
No.
Councilman, earlier you had mentioned about working on mental health, and I was kind of curious as to what you had in mind in terms of that area, in terms of that topic. You know, given the fact that as the economy has, you know, turned downward, you had more folks who became uninsured, more folks who were delaying care and having a mental crisis, and then showing up to non-designated hospitals for their mental health services, given the fact that that wouldn't be the most appropriate setting. Yet we have the backdrop of Prop 63, which is the Mental Health Services Act dollars, which funneled money to the counties to provide mental health services. But as you know, those dollars really aren't, you know, according to the county, cannot provide inpatient services, but rather are outpatient services. So I was kind of curious as to, one, what was your thought process in terms of working in mental health? Or were you going to give the fact that Mental Health Services Act dollars can't go towards inpatient, but are towards outpatient, and many of these folks now require inpatient services. So appreciate any insight you can share.
Well, first of all, I care about the mental health system for the same reason I care about the public school system. My 4-year-old daughter is going to go through the public school system, and I care about it. But I care about the mental health care system because of my 35-year-old son who's been diagnosed with schizophrenia and is homeless in Los Angeles. So, just as when my son was killed in a car accident and I realized we didn't have pediatric trauma care in the San Fernando Valley, and I created the opportunity, not just in Northridge Hospital, but throughout the system of California, every emergency room gets additional funding because of Richie's fund and because of the bill that we introduced in my son's name. I think it's important to bring your passions to the position. And I can tell you that I'm extremely passionate because my son is at County Hospital right now in a mental health ward, and we have no understanding of how to provide services to him because he's not violent. He can't be held. He chooses not to take his meds. I don't know what to do, but I know as a parent I'll find a way, just as I found a way with the pediatric trauma care system. So, you know, you and Ed are going to be the first 2 people I call to help me craft legislation to improve on the Mental Health Services Act because while I don't know exactly how it works, I know it needs to be improved, and I know that because of personal experience.
Mr. Bocanegra, do you have thoughts on the mental health?
Yeah, it's just a brief, you know, mental illness touches everybody, including my family too. So, you know, once we see the holes in coverage, once we have the implementation of the Affordable Care Act, once we see how things are working at the local level, and if there are fixes to be done at the state level, I'm going to be there because it's something that's important to me as well.
All right, bless you. Let me ask one more specific question, and then if there are no other questions from the audience, we'll go to closing. And the specific question is about public employee pensions and what you would do to, well, 1, do you believe reform is necessary? 2, if so, what would you do to reform the system?
Sure. Yes, public employee pension reform is necessary. I think our 3 largest pensions are going to have an obligation in the next 5 years that's something like 6 times the general fund budget of the state of California. Something needs to be done. I'm encouraged by the task force that was put together by Senator Steinberg and Councilmember Speaker Bettis of the bicameral task force that's currently conducting hearings looking at recommendations for reform. And I think that the proposal by Jerry Brown is also a pretty good starting place too. So I think we have to take care and follow through on our obligations that we've made to past and current employees. That has to be done. But in terms of abuses that I think we can all agree on, like spiking and what have you, I think there are things that we can try to come together on, and I'm looking forward to the report by the bicameral task force.
Well, you're looking at a couple of Democrats. We support defined benefit plans. We both publicly said that, and it's clearly an issue that we're very sensitive to. But we recognize that cuts have to be made. There's no question. The question, how do we move forward? And I'm concerned that we are cutting out middle class opportunities well into the future. In other words, the retirees provide an enormous economy for the state of California. They don't stop purchasing when they retire. In fact, they're enabled to purchase because of their retirement benefits. So we have to be very careful to be mindful of the economic impact that our retirees have in California. And by the way, they represent a huge chunk of the voters. And so we want to be very careful how we modify our public pension systems. But it is a time when we have to have those discussions. We have to move forward with reducing the future costs on the system. I think we have to look at the other side of it. As a Democrat, although Raul and I are probably going to align very, very much the same on that issue, it's not going to be a key issue in the campaign. I can tell you that one of the things that we need to look at is the investment side of the pension system. And those pension systems, they need to be held more accountable, don't you think, Greg? They need to be held more, that's an inside joke, but they need to be held more accountable for the investments that they make. I think our pension systems, for example, need to invest more in California. They need to invest more in Los Angeles. They need to create jobs in California. They need to create benefits in California. And so let's not lose sight of the opportunity to look at the expenditure side of the equation that our pension systems pay for, the capital improvement projects. We need them to invest in our transportation system. All of those things. So while we probably disagree with a lot of folks in the room relative to the defined benefit programs, we can all work together in ensuring that those systems are investing more in California.
Thank you. Before we go to closing statements and to flip the order, we'll start with you, Mr. Bocanegra. I just wanted to say, as I've gotten to know these two gentlemen over various events in the course of the years, two very fine public servants, and I think today you had an indication of how dedicated they are and how knowledgeable they are and articulate they are about the issues. So I just wanted to thank you both for one, your public service, and for coming here today and subjecting yourself to this process. With that, 2-minute closing. We'll start with Raul Bocanegra.
Well, thank you very much, Steve and Stuart, for putting this all together, and for everybody being here, and for our sponsors. I'm running for office, and my goal is to just talk to as many people as I can, and talk to many sectors of Los Angeles as I can, to share with them why I'm running for office, what's passionate for me, what's in my heart. And I got to tell you that, being the son of a gardener, and I will talk about that everywhere I go. I'm the son of a gardener. My father's 75 years old. He works at the mission in San Fernando, which is in the city of LA, but they call it San Fernando Mission. I live and breathe in working class values, and for me, the reason I got into public service was to make a difference. And I've been inspired along the way by many different people. Some of them elected officials, some of them my friends, some of them a lot of teachers. And if given the opportunity to serve, and I think that public service is an honor, it's a privilege. And I've been very blessed being a staff person all these years, and doing my part to make a difference in the Northeast San Fernando Valley in Los Angeles. I have some ideas of what I want to do if I'm lucky enough to serve as a state assembly member in Sacramento. I'm never going to forget where I've come from. Because when you're the son of a gardener, that doesn't go away. You remember when your father has to cut other people's lawns, and sometimes how he's treated poorly by people. And you have appreciation for working class families. And my story is no different than many other stories in the Northeast San Fernando Valley in Los Angeles. So with that, I want to let you know that I'm always going to be fighting for the San Fernando Valley, making sure that we get our fair share, that people have an opportunity to raise a family, to send their children to school like my parents did. They sent us all to college, to UCLA, to CSUN, to Oxy. We've been very blessed, and I just want to be part of continuing that effort that I think that I've been very fortunate of being a part of these last few years. Thank you for the opportunity to be here in front of you. I look forward to continuing the dialogue, and thank you so much.
Richard Outcome?
Yeah, you know, as I hinted before that this is a Democratic district. It's probably 65–68% Democratic, and you're not going to get the person that VICA typically would want necessarily in that position if you had free will to choose. The person that you do want to get is somebody that will work with you. Just as in any marriage, you can't agree with your spouse 100% of the time, but you want to focus on those times when you do agree, and that's when you can accomplish great things. It's been my pleasure to work with VICA to fight for the community redevelopment area. You joined with me in that fight, and I appreciate that for the benefits that have been derived from that. You helped me get the Bocanegra Enterprise Zone, which is what it was first called. Now it's the Northeast Valley Enterprise Zone. The Empowerment Zone with President Clinton. You helped me accomplish that. You supported those measures. Now, we didn't agree on the banking responsibility thing, but I think in your heart some of you did. And so I want to tell you that maybe not Stuart's heart, but he doesn't have a heart. So, so I think what you really want to do is look at, okay, when you look at the scheme of things, who are you going to be able to work with, and I think that demonstratively we've been able to do that with you, and so I will continue to go to VICA for advice on business matters, and we continue to work with you on legislation. You supported, by the way, my film work, and obviously I would be a champion on those issues as I demonstrated in City Council. I'm also going to be a hard worker, which is part of what I bring. You know, the committee that I served on, the Jobs Committee, we met something like 44 times in the year and a half or 2 years that I served as chair. The previous chair met 4 times in the previous year. That's where we did our film work. That's the FilmWorks project, the stickers you see on the trucks. That was one of the things that I introduced, was a measure to create a marketing scheme to appreciate the entertainment industry. So while we're not always going to agree, you won't have a harder worker, a more experienced fighter for the projects when we do agree. And so with that, I'm pleased to be here. I wanted also to hear what my opponent is saying about this stuff so I can get a little smarter too. So that's why we come to these forums. But more importantly, I've had relationships with almost everybody in the room that have produced some very good things for the San Fernando Valley, and I want to continue to do that as your assembly member.
Well, thank you both. That concludes our discussion today, and I also wanted to thank NBC Universal's fellow presenting sponsors, State Farm Insurance and the Association of Independent Commercial Producers, as well as our co-sponsor, San Fernando Valley Financial Development Corp, and our media sponsor, Van Nuys News Press, and always to our heartless leaders, Stuart.
Thank you to our great moderator.
Yes.
Good job. Good to see you. Luckily, I learned how to read first.
Keeping them on their toes, huh?
As always.
Things going well?
Yeah, it's about as different as it could possibly be from anything I've done before, but that's part of what I like about it. So. Thanks so much. Always good to run into you.
Hi, Chloe. Good to see you.
Or English breakfast.
Hello. Wonderful coat.
Sure, of course.
Hey.